Hey guys, Desk Letter Magic here, and apparently it's time to duel because I've been told that Magic the Gathering had traps this entire time. That's right, there is an actual set of cards from mostly the original Zendikar set that actually have the subtype of trap. Now, they're not some cool new permanent, they're not really anything, they're just spells with alternate casting costs, but they're still traps. So if I'm not mistaken, there are actually 19 of them, so I thought, well, let's just look them over in case you want to put them in your commander deck or something, because I've only ever heard of 2 of these by name, believe it or not, and I guess I just didn't realize it said instant-trap. So let's jump into Archive Trap here. It's a 5-cost instant trap, but if an opponent searched his or her library this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay Archive Trap's mana cost. So if you think about it, a free spell that's based on a condition that your opponent does. That's a trap. If you were to compare it to Yugi-oh, that is absolutely a trap. By the way, in my opinion, the entire game of Magic the Gathering is one giant trap, but that's a topic for a different video. So it says, target opponent puts the top 13 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Why could they have called it Mill Bomb? So next up, we got kind of a strange one here. It's an arrow volley trap. Normally costs 5, but you can get it down to 2 if 4 or more creatures are attacking. In general, so your creatures or their creatures. Although it does do 5 damage divided amongst the attacking creatures, so unless you really wanted to hit your creatures for some reason, which some decks do that, yeah, you'd be activating this on their attack phase. So kind of neat, but kind of weak. Next up, we got Baloth Cage Trap. It's 5-cost instant trap, of course. And if an opponent had an artifact enter the battlefield under his or her control this turn, you may pay 2 rather than pay 5. And then you create a 4/4 green beast creature token. I made a 4/4 for 2. Good luck waiting for that condition, but it's interesting. Next up, Cobra Trap. It's a 6-cost, and if a non-creature permanent under your control was destroyed this turn by a spell or ability that an opponent controlled, you may pay 1 green rather than pay its entire cost. Put 4 1/1 green snake creature tokens onto the battlefield. Oh, I love that. So if they destroy a land, an artifact, or an enchantment, or I guess a planeswalker, boy, that's where the lore falls apart. It was full of snakes. That's right, the planeswalker was full of snakes. Oh, that's just hilarious. I just love everything about that. So next up, Inferno Trap. Goes down to 1 if you've been dealt damage by 2 or more creatures this turn. And it deals 4 damage to target creature. You clearly got hit by more than 1, so only blowing away 1 is kind of weak, but it's 1 mana. Next up, very interesting one here, Lava Ball Trap, which, that is the most Indiana Jones but extra thing I've ever seen. So it normally costs 8, but if an opponent had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under his or her control this turn, which remember it was a landfall set, you may pay 5 rather than pay Lava Ball Trap's mana cost. And you just straight up destroy 2 target lands. And then it deals 4 damage to each creature. Oh my gosh, would that be devastating. So they think they're real slick with those double landfall triggers, and then you blow up both of the lands and take half their creatures with you. If they're not playing landfall, that is just not ever going to happen, but it's pretty funny. Next up, Lethargy Trap, or as I like to call it, 50% off Valentine's Day candy the day after Valentine's Day. Boy, once that sugar wears off, you go down like the Titanic. Anyway, it's a 4-cost trap, but you can get away with paying 1 if 3 or more creatures are attacking you. And all attacking creatures get -3, -0 until end of turn. I've got to say, that's not bad. You would only ever want to activate this if you're being attacked, I would assume. I guess you could pay the full 4 if only 2 creatures are attacking. So this is probably the most universally useful out of all the ones we've seen, and ironically, it's a common, but I don't know, maybe that's kind of the point. They do design commons for draft, and they want them to be very unspecific. Next up, Mind Break Trap. And by the way, the artwork on these traps, man, I don't know if you noticed, but they're pretty cool. So it's a 4-cost instant trap, and it is a mythic. If an opponent casts 3 or more spells this turn, you may pay 0 for this spell. Exile any number of target spells. I don't know if this was a thing back then in the game, but just straight up end the turn would have been even funnier. So, this would be very useful if all 3 of them were on the stack, but who stacks up spells on purpose on their turn while holding priority? It just doesn't make sense. It's not like it would never happen, it's not like there would never be a reason to do it, but it's still a bit odd. But if you're just like, okay, you're at your limit of spells, you know what, 3 is too many, boom, whatever's on the stack right now, it's gone, even if that's 1 spell. Okay. Would I prefer to just run a dang counterspell? Probably. But this, if you think about it, it's basically a free counterspell for 0. That was highly redundant. It's just conditional, but it's kind of fun. In the right scenario, this would be devastating for Commander. I think I might have to put this on the overlooked but awesome list. Next up, Needlebite Trap. It normally costs 7, but you can get it down to 1 if your opponent just simply gained life this turn. So then target player loses 5 life and you gain 5 life. You just hit the old Control-Z undo button on their life gain. That is hilarious. Once again, very narrow. I mean, unless they're even playing white, you can't really count on this happening reliably, and even then, who knows what they're running, but boy, under the right circumstances, this would be pretty funny. Next up, Nemesis Trap. It's a 6 cost, but if a white creature is attacking, you may pay 2 black instead. Exile target attacking creature, put a token that's a copy of that creature onto the battlefield, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Holy crap, is that powerful, but holy crap, is that a gamble on that ever happening. This right here is a classic sideboard card, so for the commander purposes, you know, whatever, but boy, if you're playing multiplayer, somebody's probably got white. So you get rid of their creature, you make a copy of it, and then you go to blocks. Oh man, and you know it's a throwaway creature because it's leaving at the end step. That is pretty tasty. Next up, Permafrost Trap. It's a 4 cost, but you can get it down to 1 if an opponent had a green creature enter the battlefield this turn. And what it does is it taps up to 2 target creatures. Those creatures don't untap during the controller's next untap step. So it's like, oh, I'm sorry, did you want that? Well, it's going to be gone for a couple turns there. Technically, let's just pretend it was a green creature with haste. I'm sure it exists. Okay, now they can't use it this turn. They can't block through the whole next turn cycle. Then the next turn cycle is when their next untap step happens. It's still tapped and unusable at that point. Then you get another turn cycle, and then finally it becomes untapped then. So it's gone for like, I mean, what is that, kind of 2.5 or like 1 and 2.5 turns? I've always liked the ice effect. Next up, Pitfall Trap, one of the cards that I had actually heard of. It's a 3 cost, but you can pay 1 if exactly 1 creature is attacking you. Well, okay, or attacking in general, but destroy target attacking creatures. I don't think you do it on your own turn. Oh, and without flying, by the way. There are better destroy effects that care about attacking for like 1 or 2 in the game. I don't quite like this one. Next up, Ravenous Trap. Ooh, it's a giant living trap that's going to eat you. So it normally costs 4, but you can get it all the way down to 0 if an opponent had 3 or more cards put into their graveyard from anywhere this turn. So that could be a board wipe, that could be discard effect, that could be a mill effect. I mean, there you go. And then just straight up exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So you had me in the first half, not gonna lie, but after that, you might as well just play Tormod's Crypt. Next up, Refraction Trap costs 4, but you can get it down to 1 if an opponent casts a red instant or sorcery spell this turn. You can then prevent the next 3 damage that a source of your choice would deal to you and or permanents you control this turn. If damage is prevented this way, Refraction Trap deals that much damage to target creature or player. I mean, you got Deflecting Palm, you've got even like Dazzling Reflection, which is kind of similar, but not really. I don't believe either of those cost 1, but I don't know, waiting for this to happen. Kind of a second-rate card, especially in Commander, but, you know, I'm sure in the set it was in, which was very color-specific, it was lovely. Next up, Ricochet Trap. Oh, I already know from the name what this does. Okay, so 4 cost, but not really. You can get it down to 1 red if an opponent casts a blue spell this turn, and then change the target of target spell with a single target. Now, Redirect is a very blue effect, but changing the target of spells isn't completely unheard of in red. So this one's pretty narrow, but if you pulled it off, I mean, nobody expects this from a red deck. Next up, Rune Flare Trap. It costs 6, but it really costs 1 if an opponent drew 3 or more cards this turn. And honestly, if they drew 3 or more cards, they had this coming. It deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. Ouch. Oh, for 1 mana, that could be a lot. I mean, it's bare minimum 3, and they probably did something, like on earlier turns, to pack their hand too. So, yeah. Next up, bit of a unique one here. It costs 6, but you can lower it by 1 generic for every attacking creature, and then put a 6/12 colorless construct artifact creature token with trample onto the battlefield, exile it at the beginning of your next end step. So purely defensive, even if you could give all creatures entering the battlefield haste, it still wouldn't work, because at that point you yourself would have already declared attackers. So this is just a big boy blocker right there. The thing is, though, it's like, well, you're being absolutely swarmed, and now you killed 1. Would you rather kill all of them? But I mean, you can get it down to 1. I guess if they attacked with 1 really large creature and you just paid 1 less for this, that would be some pretty good value. But I don't know, this just doesn't strike me as very good, especially for a rare. Now, obviously, you get to use the 612 during your next attack phase if you cast this during your opponent's attack phase, or I guess really anytime during their turn, because it says it doesn't get exiled until your next end step, and that's why they gave it trample, but it's still only a 612. But it's looking like you might get one block out of it, and then if you're lucky, one attack out of it. Next up, Summoning Trap, the other one that I think everybody's heard of at this point. I mean, it was in MM3, and I thought it was worth money back then. Could have sworn. Well, maybe it was, but it's 35 cents now, so damn. But yeah, this is a 6 cost, and if a creature spell you cast this turn was countered by a spell or ability an opponent controlled, you may pay 0 for this spell. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest onto the bottom of your library in any order. That is just sheer, utter power. This is an insurance policy in card form. Now I know why I've heard of this spell. This is one of the trap cards that people actually play. So I got really curious about this, like why I remembered this, because I thought it was one of the turbo hot cards. There must have been one in one of the MM sets that, I don't know, was similar sounding, or I don't know. But this card was about $2 in 2016. Not quite what I was thinking, but okay. So finally, the very last one, and you know I saved the best for last. Just kidding, these are in alphabetical order in case you didn't notice. It's Whiplash Trap. It's time to take your opponent's creatures and yeet them into space, because it costs 5, but not really, because if an opponent had 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield, even non-token creatures, under their control this turn, you may pay 1 and then return 2 target creatures to their owner's hands. Doesn't even have to be the same player in multiplayer Commander. Hell, you could target your own creatures if you had a good reason to. Can you imagine this in multiplayer? Well, one of my opponents just dropped in, 4 creatures. I guess we're gonna have to do something about that. Hey, unrelated person whose turn it isn't even. Kiss your creatures goodbye. I mean, what if somebody just dropped in 5 creatures with haste, and then you're like, well, and then took everything defensive from a different opponent, bounced it back to hand, and said, yeah, oops, you're dead. They're swinging at you now. They're getting through clear. There goes your Death Touchers. There goes your walls. Such a troll card. I love it. So those are the 19 known traps in Magic the Gathering. Hopefully they bring some back. It's just a conditional lower cost spell. I like it. I feel like some of these were so outrageously costed that you'd have to be out of your mind to try to natural cast them. But if you're just sitting there with a trap that hasn't gone off and you get to 5 or 6 mana, okay. So at least they have a backup plan, but some of these are just stupidly specific, but that's fine. Put them in the sideboard. And some of these are like, oh no, that is going to happen in a game and I am going to make them pay. I just love insurance policy cards where just in case this condition I don't want to happen happens, I can automatically do something about it. It's just like, a board wipe thing where they're like, oh, return all your creatures as 1/1s, or create a zombie for every creature that died this turn. There's some little, I want to dig myself back out of this hole, because otherwise the game swung a little bit too far away from your direction, So what do you think? Love the cards, hate the cards, indifferent, somewhere in the middle? Do you play these? Are they in your deck? Leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.